Ontario election. And we hosted the leaders of the New Democratic Party and the Liberal Party. I think you're familiar with both parties. And
very familiar with both parties.
Today's guest was scheduled before we had this unscheduled snap election. So we're very glad he's here, but he'd be right at home in any election debate because he's been around. He's been everywhere, internationally, nationally, and I never forget, provincially. So let me tell you a little bit more about today's guest, even though you may think that you know him. Bob Rae has been Canada's ambassador to the United Nations since 2020, after serving as the Prime Minister's special envoy on humanitarian and refugee issues, and our envoy investigating the Rohingya in Myanmar. One of the reasons he's such a persuasive diplomat is that he was a very undiplomatic but persuasive politician. Before that, he won election as Ontario's 21st Premier in 1990, after a snap election called by a very popular Premier. He was interim leader of the federal Liberals from 2011 to 2013 before handing it off to Justin Trudeau, and he was elected 11 times to the House of Commons and the Ontario legislature off and on for about 35 years. And I believe, we didn't fact check this, so you can correct me if I'm wrong or just leave it uncorrected, never defeated in his riding.
Correct.
So undefeated in a certain sense.
Yes, yeah. No, in many senses undefeated, as you will discover.
which is unusual in a democracy because it's hard work. He has headed public inquiries, including one on post-secondary education, so you're welcome to ask him his views on tuition and freezing tuition and funding universities. He's also advised Indigenous groups on the Ring of Fire in Northern Ontario, which is still ours. I mean, Donald Trump may have his eye on it, but it's still ours for now.
Oh, he does.
It belongs to Indigenous people, actually. He studied modern history at the University of Toronto and got his master's at Oxford as a Rhodes Scholar, master's in politics. His law degree is from U of T. You can correct me if I get anything wrong. I know you're always fact-checking me, so. He's also a distinguished fellow at the Munk School of Global Affairs and Public Policy. He's a labor lawyer by profession, a politician by disposition, and a diplomat by destiny, like his father before him, who was the ambassador to the United States. He last appeared at our Democracy Forum in 2021, shortly after heading to the United Nations. So welcome back to Toronto Met.
Thank you, Martin. It's great to be here. I think there's a boom on my mic.
Yeah. A little bit, but...
Anyway, go ahead. It makes me sound like a radio announcer. It's good. Hello, Bob Rae here.
You were a vaudevillian, I think, for a moment. So there you are. All right, first some housekeeping. Just a reminder to everyone in the audience that when you signed up for this event, and again when you checked in, you agreed to abide by our code of conduct. Something that I take seriously because I believe in treaties, I believe in trade treaties, I believe in peace treaties, and so when you sign your name to something, you agree to abide by it unless you're Donald Trump. So please abide by that code of conduct today. You get to ask questions, but you got to listen to the answers from our guest. That's how we do democracy here. There are no live microphones except for us with our little boom mics. We're using the Slido app, I believe. Catherine? Yes? No? With the screens are not working, so you can just talk to Viet or Catherine and use your phones to use the QR code. We'll explain that to you. But seriously, do start thinking about your questions, and I think they're being passed out now so that we can use Slido. Just use your phones to log in. I will kick off the questions, then we'll open it up to the audience later, so start thinking it up. I like to remind people every time this is not a news conference, as good as you are at them. It's a democracy forum where we try to dig a little deeper, so it's not a confrontation. We're just looking for more in-depth answers from our guests. Okay, let's get to it. One thing I left out of your biography is that as a teenager, you went to high school in Washington, where your father was ambassador. And now, all these years later, you're living in New York as an ambassador. So you've seen America up close. You've lived there. You grew up there. And you're at home there, it's fair to say. So you turned out okay. Why did things turn out so badly for the Americans?
Well, that's a provocative question. I think the world is going through a really difficult, challenging time, and America's no different than that. We are too. So I don't single that out one country. And I think the one thing that is important, I'm glad you mentioned it, is that having spent 12 years of my life living in the States, admittedly on the East Coast, in Boston and New York and Washington.
And that's the America most Canadians know.
Yes, it is, and sort of Eastern liberal establishment, if you like. I don't have an anti-American bone in my body. I really don't. And I think it's important for Canadians to think it through that we do share a lot with the United States. We do share a lot of cultural values. We're intermixed in terms of our people going back and forth across the border, but also families being linked up.
My brother lives for most of his life in the U.S.
There you are. So I'm just saying it's important for us to kind of come to grips with that as Canadians. Going to school in the States meant that I was consciously aware of how Canada was different. And I mean, when I was in primary school, we used to have to say the Pledge Allegiance to the flag, and I would be the only kid in the class who didn't have his hand on his heart and wasn't pledging allegiance to the flag. And early, the first time I did it, people were saying, "What's wrong with you, Bobby? Like, why aren't you?" And I said, "Because I'm Canadian." And they'd say, "What do you mean?" I said, I'm not a citizen. I'm not American." And so I've lived this contrast my whole life in terms of seeing it through. I think what we're seeing right now in the United States is really not much different from what we're all going through, and that is a very challenging economic time in the sense that there are some people who have been able to do remarkably well, and the gap between the wealthiest Americans and most other Americans is bigger than it's ever been, or certainly bigger than it's been since maybe the 1890s, before the income tax. So you had huge swaths of wealth, the Carnegies and the Vanderbilts and all those folks, and now we're in a stage where exactly the same thing is happening because of where we're at with digital and where we're at with the huge technological changes that are underway. And I do think that the economic divide is creating a lot of issues in our country, and I think it's creating a lot of issues in the United States. And I think it's also allowing the sort of the view that says, well, when that starts to happen, here comes socialism. You sort of say, that's not what's happening. It's a very different revolt that's taking place, a very different group of people who feel that they're extremely separated from society and from the way things are, and are angry and are expressing that level of anger. I don't think it's a simple answer. This is the subject of many, many, many books, but I don't think any of us should underestimate the resilience and the vibrancy of American society and its capacity to deal with the internal challenges which they're facing.
You raise an interesting point about Canada and America. We had another ambassador here a few months ago, David Cohen, the US ambassador to Canada was. He told us, don't worry, everything's going to be okay.
Yeah.
He was dead wrong.
That's what ambassadors say.
Exactly. Right. So don't be so diplomatic.
Be careful. Be careful what
Some of my best friends have been ambassadors.
Yeah.
So and Americans. But seriously, are you worried? Are you worried? This is probably not what people came here to hear about. But are you worried about that anti-Americanism that is always so ready in Canada? I remember an NDP leader, Ed Broadbent, who you knew, was also very seized of that, especially in his own party. I'm not kidding when I say because I worked overseas as a journalist, some of my best friends really are Americans, different than the ones who voted for Trump, perhaps. But are you worried about the anti-Americanism that is going to be out of the bottle now and be hard to put back in?
Well, but not just as a Canadian. I think it's a global
I am personally not hearing any anti-Americanism. Mostly, I'm hearing more Americanism. I agree. America's a great country, but I honestly maybe in the university circles they're hearing anti-Americanism, but no, it's America's a great country, and it's maybe it's more. I believe what's happened more with the tariffs is not, at least what I've seen. Okay, it's not against America, but it's more for Canada. It's not like, oh, I hate American stuff. It's more that I would rather choose a Canadian good. So it's more of a pride in Canada than I think than a negative to America. And what I've seen in my searching through the internet and stuff, right? And speaking, but so that's basically what I how I see it, and it's one of these things that'll be even so like if there is any sentiment against I don't think it'll live long. It'll be very short-lived by because that these tariffs and stuff like that are just talk and rhetoric. It's not on paper or anything. And if they do come across, it looks like it'll be very limited and not what they were said they would be. So it's just it's rhetoric and talk like that. It's not actual major. America's a great place, and Canada has such close ties with it. It can't be changed from even outrageous tariffs of one president. It would probably take three presidents, or two, at least Democrat, of to change the love Canadians have for America, because remember that most of Canada is on the border, right? Most of the Canadian population is near the border, so a lot of Canadians, most Canadians, I probably dare to say 90% have been to America, on a vacation, right? In one shape, way, or form. So that's something I definitely I don't see this at all, to be honest. Anti-Americanism is not. I don't think it's rising personally, but you know, Trump makes people more animated in politics and speak more from their sleeve, kind of thing, like I do. But I don't see that at all. I think it's a great thing. Our nations are just too closely tied for one person to be able to change
it. And it's always been there. It's always been an underlying issue because of the power of the United States and because of some of the things that they have decided to do, and some of them we've done with them, and some of them we haven't. And I think it's important for Canadians to sort of develop a stronger sense of our own history, to say that there's some conflicts where we've been engaged with the Americans, and there's others, global conflicts, and there's others where we decided, no, that's not what we thought was the right thing to do. And that makes our relationship with the Americans always tense. Just today, or yesterday, the president signed an executive order sanctioning the International Criminal Court. Mm-hmm. Canada doesn't agree with that. And we've signaled publicly, together with, I think it's 77 other countries, that we think that's a serious challenge to the rule of law internationally, and it's something we don't think is a good idea. There are over 50 Canadians who work at the court, including a judge who sits on the court. And the executive orders, the details of it, like everything else, are yet to come, because got to have more than one day's news on this thing. And so that's an ongoing challenge. There are areas where we have significant differences of opinion. There are areas where we have significant agreements, and sometimes people say shouldn't agree on anything, and I say, well, no. If it's a substantive issue where we do agree, then we should be on board.
But you got to talk to the people you don't agree with. You can't just talk.
Oh, I do that all the time.
And you do that as a diplomat. You do it as a politician.
Yeah.
And you did it on Fox News the other night.
Yes, I did.
I don't subscribe, but I did watch it online. We can role play if you want, in case people.
No.
I can be the Fox
News
host.
No, you don't need to. It's all right.
But you gave as good as you got, but it didn't go over very well. And you were telling me earlier you got a lot of hate mail.
No. You're confusing two different things. It went over great, as far as I was concerned. And as a result, I got a lot of negative feedback from the people that you would predict I would get negative feedback.
I've seen him do this before. But one of Mr. Trump's envoys, I think his special envoy in particular, said that you were imploding on TV. So in terms of your audience that you were trying to reach, it's hard to get through. How do you get through?
Well, I think you do get through. What is my audience? I very rarely refuse an interview unless I'm told by the government to not do the interview because they don't want me to do it. And I say, fine. And they've allowed me to do this, by the way. So
I was going to say
this is high risk. It's a high wire thing. Yeah, you see, you always look a little negatively at things, Martin. What would you expect somebody everybody who's involved in social media is representing somebody, and is whatever they say, they're doing it for a purpose and for a reason, and because they're trying to undermine the credibility of the other person. That's the problem with social media. That's what makes it such a...
But your appeal was to treat the Prime Minister and the country with dignity.
Yes. And it remains that, and I think a lot of Canadians heard that message, and I think a lot of Canadians appreciated the fact that their representative of the United Nations was saying that on Fox News. And I wouldn't hesitate to go on Fox News again. If somebody said, would you go back? I said, of course.
Yeah, well, Pete Buttigieg does it quite well
right.
as well.
But I'm sure he gets negative mail as well.
So one can only imagine. So one of the fun things that the host tried to do with you, have fun with you, was to read something you wrote in the Toronto Star back in 2017.
Good paper.
A great newspaper, a great national newspaper, biggest in Canada. And you said in 2017 about Trump, he should not be welcome in our country. And you, of course, pointed out that was you talking as a private citizen, but he is scheduled to come, perhaps, for the G7 in Alberta this year. Should he be welcome, or will he be, not, you can't say that, but will he be welcome, or will he get a terrible reception?
Well, I certainly think he should come. I mean, that's got to make that very clear. Again, I don't quite know the context of the piece that I was writing. I think I suspect I was talking about how one needs to take what the president says seriously, and how there's some of the things that he's saying that go beyond what I think is something that Canadians would embrace.
I'm going to be diplomatic about what you said.
Yeah. But
it was a strong piece.
But what I do think is that he's the president of the United States, and if he's coming to an international conference, which you're holding in Canada, he should come here, and he should be welcomed here in that role.
I want to take you back in time to 2021 when you appeared here. Joe Biden had just been elected president of the United States. Donald Trump was in the dustbin of history, as you might say.
I would never say that.
Joe Biden.
If that was true, I would have entered the dustbin in 1995. And life's been pretty good since then, so I wouldn't say that.
Joe Biden was holding democracy summits.
Yeah.
Russia had not yet attacked Ukraine, and you and I were talking about peace in the Middle East, how people shouldn't forget about it just because it was relatively quiet at the time. And then you went to the UN, and the world fell apart.
No, I was there when I said that. I was there when
yes,
Biden
that's
was
true.
elected.
You had just arrived. But speaking of history, it does feel like people are forgetting their history. Here's something that you wrote the other day on social media, so it must be true. You said, the UN Charter was drafted in 1945 by people who had learned the lessons that the aggression, isolationism, and tariff barriers of the 20s and 30s had led the world into conflagration. Article 1 makes it clear, threats of annexation are illegal. So are unilateral tariffs in breach of a trade agreement. And today, this morning, a prime minister had a closed-door meeting with a bunch of influencers, as we call them today, union leaders, business leaders, thought leaders. Karim Bardisi was there, and he said that Donald Trump is serious about taking over Canada. He said that this was not in his public remarks. Some journalists found this out. It's in the Toronto Star if you want to look it up right now on your phones. And he said that he wants our minerals, our rare minerals. So what's going to happen?
Well, I think the challenge is that whether it's Canada or Greenland or Panama or Gaza, I would say the president has very expansionist ideas about what the United States should be doing and how it should be doing it. And what I was saying in that tweet, which was something I thought about, saying let's put this in a context, and that is that the generation that created the United Nations had learned the hard way how really dangerous things can happen to world order when everybody thinks about themselves and nobody thinks about the common good, and nobody looks at how can we create stronger ties between countries, how can we improve trade relations, how can we enhance prosperity, how can we do all these things. And I think it's really important for us to remember that and to keep understanding that, and frankly, this has been a driver of Canadian policy ever since 1945. I mean, if you look at our record as a country, we were obviously present at the creation of the United Nations in 1945. We were present at the creation of NATO, which not everybody said that's a great idea, but certainly Canadian governments have consistently
Your
said
friends in the NDP, and you had a few, were not that fond of NATO or NORAD.
But that's why I think we needed to maintain the position that it is important for us to do that. I think it's also important we were present at the creation of the General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade. In fact, there was a Canadian public servant who was one of the main drafters of the treaty. And so you just go down this list of the things that we've stood for, and then we go into the Landmines Treaty and the ICC, we go into the drafting of the Universal Declaration on Human Rights. Again, it was a Canadian who was holding the pen. With Eleanor Roosevelt was chair of the committee, but he was the guy with the pen that was helping to draft it. So when you look at this history that we've had, we're not a superpower.
We're a middle power.
We're a middle power, but we're a middle power that lives next door to a superpower. And as Prime Minister Trudeau Sr. used to say, it's like sleeping with an elephant. And when the elephant rolls over, you feel it. And so that's the challenge that we have. It's the same challenge that we've always had. And it's just that right now, it's ever more serious than it's ever been, because we have not had an American president who had such a nationalist and expansionist view of American power in office in my lifetime. So it's a new ball game as far as that goes, and it's a challenge between those people who say politics is about power, it's not about the rule of law, it's about the rule of men, and it's a knife fight. The world is a knife fight, and you just go into that and you win or lose, or the Canadian perspective, which is not so much. We do value laws, we do value rules, we do value the relationships that we establish. Not everything is a transaction. Some things are relationships. And there's a real difference between all of these things. And that's, I think, the tension and the difference that we're seeing.
But that's why we supported it, because we didn't have the big knife, and maybe because our Canadian outlook is to have and value relationships. But now, you have a president so we're worried about our own fate, but we'll survive. We may not thrive, but we'll survive. But what about the rest of the world? I mean, Trump is cutting foreign aid. He's going to almost certainly cut more funding to the United Nations, which has the World Food Program, the World Health Organization. He's pulling out of that. So that constellation of relationships that you talked about is in such disarray now, not just because of America, but if you think of the Security Council, which governs the UN, China, which we talked about last time, Russia. So how do you do your job? How is your job changing at the UN today compared to how it looked when you took it on 5 years ago?
I don't think it's that much different. I would argue that the challenge, for me, the challenge was very clear after the first while that I was there. The first challenge is really about what I would call where is the public at? Where is public opinion at? In Canada, obviously my first priority, in the United States, and around the world. And I think we make a mistake when we say it's just one person. And that, frankly, it doesn't just oversimplify the situation, it's also inaccurate, because we need to understand that the kind of tensions you talked about in the first question about what's happening to public opinion, if you like, in the United States, is that this is reflected in our own country too, It's reflected in our own opinion. And the first time I really came up against it was in the pandemic, because I went down in the middle of the pandemic. And the first thing as a Canadian representative at the UN you get right away is exactly what you're saying. All the countries of the world. UN is 193 countries, and we're sitting in the General Assembly. And the first 6 months that I was there, I sat there alone because no staff are allowed in. And you can only have one person, you have to be socially distanced wearing a mask. It's an odd way to meet 192 other people, but that's the way it was. And as we were doing so, the question very quickly turned to, what are you doing about COVID? What are you doing about the vaccine? Can you give us some of your vaccine? Can you share your vaccine? Can we make sure that we get vaccinated so that we can deal with the crisis? And I think one of the things that has helped to make life more difficult is that the response of the West to that situation was insufficiently strong, to put it as diplomatically as I can. We did some stuff. We provided support for the institutions in Geneva. We provided funding for the WHO and other institutions. We did something. We didn't do nothing. But we collectively didn't do enough. And we didn't do enough because domestic opinion in Canada was saying, don't you dare send anything out overseas unless it's, I've got mine first. And even after that, they'd say, but even then, I want more. I want my second one.
And that is how democracies work.
That's how democracies work. And that's where I think we have to understand that one of the tensions of democracy, this is a forum on democracy, one of the key tensions on democracy is don't assume that the majority of people are always open-minded, generous, and internationally sensitive in their responses to what's going on in the world. It's not the case. And that's why I think we have to make a much stronger argument with everyone, not speaking down to people and not wagging our fingers at them, but just saying it's actually in our interest to express greater solidarity with the rest of the world. It actually is not a kind of win-lose proposition. It actually is a situation where building up support for a better public good globally actually makes us more secure, actually helps us deal with our problems. And I think increasingly we're having, whether it's, and Your Honor's here, Elizabeth Dowdeswell here, who's been one of the pioneers in environmental strategies in Canada and globally.
Can I interrupt you? Elizabeth Dowdeswell's here, our former lieutenant governor.
We're delighted to have her here.
Annoyed at us for giving her a shout out, and that reference was not just to her service in Ontario, but also as the head of the United Nations Environment Program in Nairobi, a very dangerous posting.
Not at all.
Also an advisor to the Democracy
A great
Forum.
posting, a great posting. But I just to say on that, take climate change. There is no national answer to climate change on its own. It doesn't exist. We could do everything. We could reduce our emissions to zero tomorrow, and nothing would change in any significant way in terms of the weather and the impacts, the storms, the rising sea levels, all the rest of it. Which is why, frankly, as a political issue, it's actually very difficult to go on the doorstep, which is something that I've done, as you pointed out, 11 times. So it's a lot of door knocking, and you do get to understand what the nature of the democratic conversation is. And most people will say, so what if I do this? Can you promise me that the weather will get better and that I won't have to face these storms and it won't be that? And I have to say, no, I can't promise you that at all. All I can tell you is we won't be able to deal with what is a global, immediate, but also very long-term problem. We have to turn the dial on this question in a very significant way, and it's extremely difficult to do. The world has never made this kind of a change before, led by political leaders. Yes, have we changed how we produce things? Absolutely, but it's not because a bunch of leaders got together in Dusseldorf in 1422 and said, what are we going to do about this printing press? It's pretty exciting, but what are we going to do? It might put a whole lot of churches out of business because people are going to be able to read this stuff for themselves and all the sorts of things are going to happen. It's a very dangerous thing. No, it happens because it's a real technological change. It's a real thing. And that's how climate change happened, because we started to produce energy and started to produce industrial growth, and it took away, it has changed the climate, has changed the way we exist as a planet. So now we armed with science and armed with a certain amount of knowledge, say we do have to do this, and it's damn difficult.
Well, the science is great. The political science is the hard part.
It's the hard part.
Yeah.
But it's not just the political science in Canada. It's the political science globally. And so there's two things that need to happen to be positive about it. The first thing is we need to understand that most of the countries in the world are not big emitters. They're not. They are takers of climate change, and they suffer from it. And they have real needs in terms of adaptation and how their societies can become more resilient in the face of climate change. That's the first thing. We have to listen to that. And the second thing is, in order for us to convince the newly industrializing countries that we've got to make progress, we have to be part of the answer.
Okay, we got Trump speaking with the Japanese Prime Minister right now. Down below, so I'm going to put up that, but it's going to have to be a little bit small. Just going to have to give me a second. So he's talking about how political science is very difficult. Of a place to make change, where I believe, I think he's right. So we need technological stuff. If you want change, you get technology to do it. It works. So I'm just going to pull it up.
Because they're going to look to us.
Oh, sorry, here. All right.
Across the vast ocean.
Yeah,
Okay, so they're just
keep killing
doing that thing. I have to do some adjustments here. Need to eat now. So he's been talking. This is about the Toronto Metropolitan University.
Ladies and gentlemen, the President of the United States and the Prime Minister of Japan.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. It's a great honor to be with the Prime Minister. We had a picture taken a little while ago, and it was so nice I thought I'd present it to you on stage. And here's the picture. I wish I was as handsome as him, but I'm not.
There we go. Okay.
Okay, thank you. Oh.
I guess I had my mic up.
Remember that
So
day.
this is live. We're a little bit
Thank
behind
you very
live
much,
because
everybody. Appreciate it. I'm delighted to welcome
let's see what he
Japanese
has to
Prime
announce.
Minister Ishiba Shigeru to the White House for the first time. And Prime Minister, it's an honor to have you with us, a great honor. Japan is a great country. Thank you very much. Japan is strong and proud. It's a nation that is home to one of the great civilizations in the history of the world. For nearly 80 years, the American-Japanese people have enjoyed a friendship like few others. We've had a great friendship across the vast ocean, and we found ourselves united by bonds of history, commerce, culture, mutual admiration, and great respect. After our meeting today, I'm confident that the cherished alliances between our two countries and others also will continue to flourish long and into the future. The military cooperation between the United States and Japan is one of our closest security partnerships, and it's one of the closest we have anywhere in the world. Our service members work together every day to defend our common interests. Japan is committed to double its defense spending by 2027 compared to my first term. They've invested a lot of money because of my first term. We worked on that very hard with Shinzo, the great Shinzo Abe. And we look forward to seeing even more so. Shinzo and I worked very, very long and hard, and those numbers are very reflective after my first term. And now they're going up very substantially based on our conversations today. In addition to being vital for our shared security, Japan is one of the top purchasers of U.S. military exports and equipment. And I'm pleased to say that this week my administration approved nearly $1 billion in foreign military sales to Tokyo. The United States is totally committed to the security of Japan. We will extend the full strength of American deterrence capabilities in defense of our friend and ally, 100%. In the years to come, the Prime Minister and I will be working closely together to maintain peace and security, and I also say peace through strength, and all over the Indo-Pacific. And to that end, we also remain committed to the effort I began in my first term to ensure safety and stability on the Korean Peninsula. Prime Minister Ishiba and I spoke long and hard about a vital economic relationship between our two countries and the continuance of that relationship. The United States and Japan trade over $300 billion in goods and services each year. Japan has invested nearly $800 billion, and that's going to go up very, very substantially in the coming months, more than any other country. And they're going to have some competition. We have a lot of people coming in and investing in the United States. I think the feeling throughout the world has never been stronger about this country. As a result of our victory in 2024, the presidential election, the Japanese investment and technology giant SoftBank announced plans to invest between $100 and $200 billion. And we have many other companies investing that number, higher than that number, some a little bit less, but we have trillions of dollars of investment pouring into our country now that you didn't have just a short while ago. Today, our teams discussed how our two nations can do even more to stay on the cutting edge of artificial intelligence, along with the quantum computing, semiconductors, and other critical technologies. And they're coming out. The problem with technology, that kind, it's obsolete in about 2 days, so we have to start all over again. Doesn't last long. We agreed to cooperate even more closely to combat the Chinese economic aggression, which is quite aggressive. I'm also pleased to announce that Japan will soon begin importing historic new shipments of clean American liquefied natural gas in record numbers. It'll be record numbers. With our Secretary of the Interior, we were talking, I think Doug is here. Hello, Doug. Please stand up, Doug. Doug Burgum, everybody. We're talking about the pipeline in Alaska, which is the closest point of major oil and gas to Japan by far. Less than half the distance of any other location. We're talking about a joint venture of some type between Japan and us having to do with Alaska oil and gas, and that's very exciting. They're very excited about it, so are we. As we deepen our economic relationship, I made clear that the United States will be conducting trade with all countries based on the principle of fairness and reciprocity. Chronic trade deficits not only undermine our economy, they really do, and we're going to get rid of the trade. We have a trade deficit with Japan of over $100 billion, but we're going to work that out, and I think very quickly, frankly. We can do it just on oil and gas. We can work it out, so we intend to do it very quickly. We both understand that. And as America welcomes new foreign investment, we also want to ensure that companies build their products and factories here in America, not simply buy the assets that we have. And Japan is going to be opening up auto plants. New auto plants are being built currently as we speak. They've just been started. Toyota is one, and Nissan's going to be doing something very exciting about U.S. Steel. They'll be looking at an investment rather than a purchase. We didn't like the idea. U.S. Steel is a very important company to us. It was the greatest company in the world for 15 years, many years ago, 80 years ago. And we didn't want to see that leave, and it wouldn't actually leave, but the concept psychologically not good. So they've agreed to invest heavily in U.S. Steel as opposed to own it, and that sounds very exciting. And we're going to meet with Nissan next week, the head of Nissan, very great company, and they'll work out the details. I'll help. I'll be there to mediate and arbitrate. And I had the privilege of working closely with the great Prime Minister, as you know, and you know him very well, Shinzo Abe, the longest-serving Prime Minister in Japan's history. Likewise, I expect that this Prime Minister is going to be a great one. I really believe that he's going to be a great one. I've gotten to know him for not long, but I can see what they have. He's got the qualities of greatness. He's going to do a fantastic job for Japan and for the Japanese people. And I'd like now to invite the Prime Minister to say a few words, and then we'll take some questions. Mr. Prime Minister, thank you. Thank you very much.
Mr. President Trump, I would like to sincerely thank you for inviting me to the White House today, immediately following your inauguration. I also thank you for your very warm hospitality.
I gotta put this thing on.
I have come to...
All right, I just pause before we... well, maybe I will.
Washington, D.C., with the hope of having a face-to-face meeting and deepening our mutual understanding at this early date with President Trump, who is now leading the...
Okay, so what did he just say? I'm just going to go over quickly. U.S. Steel was about to be bought by a Japanese conglomerate company, right? Close ally. But as Trump explained, POTUS, that sorry, I just and so he explained that U.S. Steel is really, it was like a huge deal back in the day. And it's required if they're going to ever build defense. Now, Japan is probably the closest ally, one of the, especially in Asia Pacific. But Biden put a stop on it of that company because it's a required asset of America, if anything, for defense purposes, right? If they're going to build tanks and all these products. So it was put on a thing now, and then it was like, well, what happens with U.S. Steel? Because it's in trouble, right? It needs a new investment. It needs new technologies, and Japan has been one of the leaders in these new technologies of steel, and it needs an influx. So this is really good news to me that now there's still going to be they're going to be investors, but they won't flat out own it. So it'll still be American-owned, but they're going to be heavy investors. So that's good. It's a win-win. We found a win-win. Now, what Trump's talking about, all the factories and stuff like that, what's happening now, this is something that I don't want to call it, it's not inevitable, but it's pretty close to it. It's naturally going that way. When these chip factories that they're making in the States, what most likely is going to happen is the States won't be allowing these companies to sell the chips to just anybody, as it is now. But I think it'll be even more stringent. And first orders will go to American companies. And that means things are going to need to be built in America. And you can't just build a factory in a day. It takes years. So 3 years, 4 years to build it, especially with these environmental laws. So it takes a long time to build the factories. So they have to start today, building the factories of what they're going to build for tomorrow. What are they going to build? No one's even 100%. Well, I bet you there are people who know, have a good idea of the products of the future. But it's not common knowledge, and I think the factories just need to be built and is wide available to, adaptable as possible to make the products of tomorrow, because the chips are coming. Once these chips are we're going to have all kinds of robots. There'll be one, and space flight. Most likely, we're going to be able to do things that only the super rich do, like go to space. It'll be done by the average bloke. Well, you know what I mean? This type of thing we're going to be doing that. And that's going to take technologies and chips and robotic stuff to do all the calculations and all these beautiful, wonderful things. Like the Gutenberg press, but with chips. So America's going to need to have the factories, because they're not going to want to allow that outside for security reasons and also others, because there's a little bit of a economic thing going on, right? And so him building the factories and having them in America, Toyota today makes cars, and they're going to build a car factory, but it may make robots, right? In 10 years. And those robots will have to be made in America for security reasons, just like U.S. Steel, right? So they can be an investor in the country and then under the yoke of the American security arm in America, not. So these are things that I see as like kind of naturally going to the future, and Trump is guiding them in a good way, bringing in partners as they can. Instead of just canceling the U.S. Steel deal, now they're saying, okay, they're going to be heavy investors, not owners, which is a big difference, right? And what's happening now? Japan just, I can't remember, is it 40 billion, or I should pull up the number, but the largest investment they've ever put into military spending just happened, and I think it's maybe actually like 100 billion to be on. Yeah, 100 billion. Yeah. Over 100 billion they invested into the military. And so that means about 80% of that money, maybe it'll be a little bit less because Japan has a very big manufacturing sector, but we'll say 70% to be cautious. 70% of that money is going to go to American defense contractors. They're just the ones that build the stuff. They have all the high technologies and the newest stuff. So that money is just definitely huge investment in America. And so that's probably a part of the reason why they wanted to get U.S. Steel, one of the companies were like, hey, we know we're going to be building, our stuff, military hardware. And so they were probably looking at, hey, this is a great idea. Now, it was Biden and the administration blocked it. Trump didn't flip that. What he did, he made a deal, right, that they can be investors. Okay, that's this is all good news. Japan is awesome. Ramen noodles, sushi, island, samurai. Like, it's just nothing bad to say about Japan. That's what I have to say. I really don't. It's just a wonderful country with a really good culture. And who doesn't like the cherry blossom picture with that mountain behind it? You're like, come on. All right.
United States, the most important country for Japan's diplomacy and security, and aligning our perspectives and visions that Japan and the United States should pursue. What should we do to advance the national interests of both of our countries in synergy and to realize peace and prosperity in the Indo-Pacific? I am convinced that the answer lies in further strengthening the strong and unwavering Japan-U.S. alliance to achieve a free and open Indo-Pacific. President and I concurred to strengthen the deterrence and response capabilities of the alliance and to work closely in addressing strategic challenges that both countries are facing in this region. I conveyed to the President that Japan, as an ally of the United States, is ready to share responsibilities and to play its own role. I also reiterated Japan's unwavering commitment to fundamentally reinforcing its defense capabilities, and we confirmed the unwavering commitment by the United States to the defense of Japan. We reaffirmed that Article 5 of the Japan-U.S. Treaty of Mutual Cooperation and Security applies to the Senkaku Islands, with half of the world's population and approximately 60% of the world's GDP. The Indo-Pacific serves as the engine of growth and vitality for Japan, the United States, and the world. President and I also concurred that the United States and Japan will make further efforts in a wide range of areas, working hand in hand together to realize a free and open Indo-Pacific. In this context, we also concurred to further advance cooperation of the multi-layered networks of the like-minded countries, including the Quad and trilateral cooperation with the Republic of Korea and the Philippines. We also discussed Japan-United States cooperation to bring about growth and prosperity. Economic cooperation, including on economic security, is important from the perspective of strengthening alliance cooperation. Japan is the closest economic partner of the United States and has been the world's largest investor in the United States for 5 consecutive years. Also, with the inauguration of President Trump, the momentum for Japanese companies to invest in the United States is growing even stronger. Today, I conveyed my willingness to cooperate together to elevate Japan's investment in the United States to an unprecedented amount of $1 trillion. President Trump and myself also concurred to elevate the Japan-U.S. partnership to an even higher level through improving business environment and increasing bilateral investment and employment, strengthening each other's industries, leading the world in developing advanced technologies such as AI and leading-edge semiconductors, and strongly promoting efforts to harness the energy of the growing market in the Indo-Pacific region. We also confirmed that we will cooperate to strengthen energy security between the two countries, including increasing exports of United States liquefied natural gas to Japan in a mutually beneficial manner. Regarding foreign exchange, as in the first Trump administration, close discussions will continue between Japanese and the U.S. finance ministers who are experts in this field.
We also held candid discussions on challenges the Indo-Pacific region is facing. We confirmed that we are resolved not to allow unilateral attempts to change the status quo by force or coercion, and to oppose such attempts in the East and South China Seas in order to fully defend a free and open Indo-Pacific. We also reiterated the importance of peace and stability across the Taiwan Strait. Regarding North Korea, we affirmed the need to address its nuclear and missile program, which poses a serious threat to Japan, the U.S., and beyond, and that Japan and the U.S. will work together toward the complete denuclearization.
Okay, so they're talking about defense, so I want to get on this. As I was talking about earlier, they have, for the 10th year in a row, they've been increasing their military spending, Japan, and they increased it by 10%. Okay, last year, 51 billion. They approved. Okay, on December 27th, the cabinet of Japanese Prime Minister Ishiba Shigeru. Sorry, that's the first time I've said it. Approved 55.1 billion in defense spending for the fiscal year of 2025, starting in April, what Tokyo calls the most severe and complex security environment since the end of the World War II. And that's not okay. So it passed. Okay, yeah. And there's another one. It marks the 3rd year of new defense spending. it outlines a $273 billion. So it's triple what I said. 2.7, $273 billion they're going to put over the next 5 years into their spending, plus the 50 billion annual, whatever, which is to keep it rolling. So that's major investment. So 70% of that is going to American companies and American stuff like that. So obviously them investing in America makes sense because they're putting so much of their money into the defense of Japan. And so Toyota moving there and all these other companies, to build the other items that are going to be needed in this major procurement. Unseen. You haven't seen this in forever. Japan, major spending like this. So he's going to say it, but they want longer range missiles, comprehensive air and missile defense capabilities, which, remember the iron, what are they calling it? It's not the Iron Dome, but the iron missiles is what Trump is going to be building in America. Japan is also, looks like they're wanting something similar to the Iron Dome, which the Israelis have. It's a joint effort, of course, American and Israeli company. But the Iron Dome, David Sling, and the third layer, Moses thing. So there's 3 layers, and that's basically what they're looking at. Cross-domain operational capabilities in space, cyberspace, and electromagnetic domains, which we won't get into. Command and control intelligence-related functions. Maneuvering and deploying capability to send troops and supplies to front line of a conflict. So that's ships for Japan, ships and planes of that, and sustainability and resiliency. So to be able to repair things. These are kind of lessons learned that are happening out of Ukraine. Like, you have a tank, but a tank only lasts a few days on the front lines. You have to have the sustainability, basically the repair shops all ready to go. Not, we'll do that later. No, it has to be ready to go, stockpiled parts and things like that, things that are common breaking things. And you have to get your people to wherever, your people and whatever, material, to where it has to go. And this is what they're doing. Okay, so let's listen to them.
Of North Korea. As the abductees and their families continue to age, I conveyed my strong sense of urgency and determination directly to President Trump and gained his renewed strong support for the immediate resolution of the abductions issue. While this was my first face-to-face meeting with President Trump, we were able to openly and frankly exchange views, and our meeting turned out to be very productive and meaningful. As a result of today's meeting, which marked a new departure for the Japan-U.S. relations, we are issuing a Japan-U.S. Joint Leader Statement. This document will serve as a compass for further cooperation between our 2 countries. On the basis of these deliverables, I look forward to working together with President Trump, who I respect immensely, to usher in a new golden age of Japan-U.S. relations. I look forward to welcoming you to Japan. And I'm very excited about that prospect. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Any questions, please? Peter?
Golf
President
clap.
Trump, I have 2 on Doge. Elon Musk said today, I love Donald Trump as much as a straight man can love another man. What does the First Lady think about that?
Oh, I think she'll be okay with it somehow.
So, Democratic lawmakers are really upset that Doge engineers have access to these Treasury payment systems. The Senate Intel Dems wrote a letter to Susie Wiles. They're saying that these disperse trillions of dollars each year and contain everyday Americans' personal information like social security numbers, home addresses, bank accounts. Why does DOJ need all of that?
Well, it doesn't, but they get it very easily. I mean, we don't have very good security in our country, and they get it very easily. And what we're doing, if you look at what has just taken place with respect to some of the investments that have been made on another agency that people have been talking about for years, but nobody did anything about it, it's absolutely obscene, dangerous, bad, very costly. I mean, virtually every investment made is a con job. There's nothing of value to anybody unless there's a kickback scheme going on, which is possible. And we're going to be doing more and more of that. We're going to be looking at Department of Education. We're going to be looking at even our military. We're going to be looking at tremendous amounts of money, Peter, being spent on things that bear no relationship to anything and have no value. We're talking about trillions of dollars. It will be, in the end, trillions of dollars being absolutely wasted and perhaps illegally. I would say certainly in many cases illegally, but perhaps illegally overall. And I'm very proud of the job that this group of young people, generally young people, but very smart people, they're doing. They're doing it at my insistence. It would be a lot easier not to do it, but we have to take some of these things apart to find the corruption, and we found tremendous corruption.
You mentioned the Department of Education. What did you think when you saw Democratic lawmakers trying to get into the Department of Education earlier today?
Oh, I see the same ones. I see Maxine Waters, a lowlife. I see, all these people. They don't love our country. They don't love our country. We want great education. So they rank 40 countries in education. We're ranked dead last. But the good news is we're number one in one category. You know what that is? Cost per pupil. We spend more per pupil than any other country in the world.
Hill Times has really good free courses just to get you introduction. Hill Times, Hillsdale
Finland,
College.
China does
Go
very
there,
well
check
in
it out, free.
education.
I should
And then
do
you
that
look
on
at us.
Sunday.
We spend much more money than they do per pupil, or any other way. But we spend much more money than they do, and yet we're ranked this year. Biden's last year. Congratulations, Joe. We're ranked dead last. So what I want to see is education. Number one, I like choice. We all like choice. But beyond choice, long beyond choice, I want to see it go back to the states where great states that do so well have no debt. They're operated brilliantly. They'll be as good as Norway or Denmark or Sweden or any of the other highly ranked countries. They'll be, probably have 35 to 38 states will be right at the top. And the rest will come along. They'll have to come along competitively. And by the way, we'll be spending a lot less money. And we'll have great education.
As part of this DOJ cost-cutting effort, one of the DOJ engineers was fired for some inappropriate posts. The vice president says, bring him back. What do you say?
Well, I don't know about the particular thing, but if the vice president said that, did you say that? I'm with the vice president. Thank you, Peter. Yeah, go ahead, please. Yes, red dress.
Thank you so much, Mr. President. Just how strong do you want Japan's military to be? And do you specifically hope that their increased military spending will deter China and North Korea? What did you talk about that today?
Well, I want our military to be the strongest. I also don't mind spending so much money on the military because we build it here. It's made in the USA, all made in the USA. We have, I rebuilt our military during my first term. Did a great job. We left some of it behind in Afghanistan, stupidly. There was no reason for that, but it was still as much as it was. It was billions and billions of dollars, but it was a small part of it. But we're going to have the strongest military by far. We have great people. I want to congratulate Pete Hegseth for having gone through the gauntlet. He went through a lot, but he got through, and he's going to be I have no doubt he's going to be a tremendous leader. And other of the leaders sitting here, they're
Okay, I just want to, and I'm not justifying it. I don't believe that it should have done. There's a thing that I read somewhere, military doctrine is you can't leave any defensive buildings and that's like, those Gabion baskets, they're like baskets of stone and stuff like that in it. And, and you put that into a into a U shape, and that's a defensive structure. You're not allowed to leave these things when you leave an area. That's like in Canadian doctrine. Okay, that's what I read, and this is old. It was old stuff, whatever. And so I read it, and I believed it. I believe it. I think it's a wise, argued with it at the time, and then I saw the reason in it. And what there was people that argued on the Afghanistan side of getting rid of it were that it's going to cost so much money to pull it back, and a lot of this stuff is, worked, and that was the argument. Hey, Google, turn off, please. That was the argument, that it would cost so much money to return this stuff, right? And it would have been very, very, very expensive. So it was a cost thingy, and it was decided we'll just leave it there, right? I don't know if I don't know if it was a good decision. I don't think it was, personally. I thought it should have been brought back, but it was a money decision and a security decision someone else made. I'm not defending this position. Security decision. I said, well, this weapons or short range stuff, they actually won't affect America or security of anyone around, even Pakistan or anything. It's basically these people are going to have it for a while, and it's going to break down, and it won't be of any use. That was like an argument that I read, whether it was actual, it was like, well, what is that the case? Well, is that it? And it kind of was, but it's awful to see that equipment being run. They do a parade. They parade it like, they do their parades of this equipment. But since that day, it's broken down. It's broken down. It hasn't been used on anybody. But it's bad optics, and that's where and it is against the doctrine. But it was a dollar saving, so I'm going in a circle on this. But that was the decision that was made from the previous administration, of course. And it looks, and this is what Trump is on. He's like, hey, we shouldn't have been that way. It should have been another way, right? But that's how it went, right? And that's, right, where we're at. Hopefully we don't have any more Afghanistans or anything like that. Like, countries that, what did just Trump say, had no business being in. I don't want to go on that point too much.
In their own fields, we're going to do something very, very, very great, and we expect
when the leaders make decisions, the military follows, right?
Far stronger than China,
like
far
it or not,
stronger than anybody, and that's the way it is. Thank you very much.
That's the way it is.
Would you like to?
That's true. That's just the way it is.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you.
This is Hiramoto from Nippon Television. My question, let me ask two quick questions.
Sure.
First, this is the first meeting between Mr. President and Prime Minister Ishiba. So what kind of impression do you have on him? And number two, do you have an idea or do you have a plan to impose tariff against Japan so far? Thank you.
I think that he is going to be a great prime minister. I think he's a very strong man, very, very strong. I have great respect for him. I've known him for a long time through a reputation. Shinzo Abe thought the world of him, and I think he's going to do a fantastic job as prime minister. A very strong person. I wish he wasn't so strong. I wish he was a little bit weaker than that, but that's what I got. I have to get strong guys all the time. He's going to be a great prime minister. I also, in terms of tariffs, I mean, we're going to have tariffs, mostly reciprocal tariffs, where we go with, and I'm going to be probably meeting on that Monday or Tuesday, have an announcement, probably a news conference, but probably reciprocal tariffs where a country pays so much or charges us so much, and we do the same. So very reciprocal, because I think that's the only fair way to do it. That way, nobody's hurt. They charge us, we charge them. It's the same thing. And I seem to be going in that line as opposed to a flat fee tariff. Okay? Yes, go, please. Please, go ahead. Why don't you go ahead?
This is Ota from Yomiuri Shimbun newspaper. I have a question for Prime Minister Ishiba. So this is your very first summit meeting. What was your impression of President Trump? Were you able to build a good relationship of trust and confidence? In Northeast Asia, there are many challenges, China, North Korea, and so forth. And with President Trump, what did you appeal to him, and what kind of understanding were you able to obtain? On the economic field, there is the acquisition of U.S. Steel, the buy Nippon Steel, and there are expansion of import of LNG. What were the communication discussion did you have with President Trump? For the $1 trillion of investment from Japan to investment, what was his reaction? What about your communication on tariff front? This is the first time that I met with President Trump in person. So this was the first time meeting face to face. But for many, many years, I have watched him on television. So it was quite I was so excited to see such a celebrity on television, to see in person. On television, he is frightening, and he has the very strong personality. But when I met with him, actually, he was very sincere and very powerful and with strong will for the United States as for the whole world. I was able to feel that. This is not the sort of polishing or trying to suck up to him. For the world peace and for the regional stability that both of our countries.
That's great the way he said it, and I kind of am on this thing. I believe that in a type of, and this is just my opinion, okay? Everyone has their own on democracy, but a democracy to function well, I believe that it should have every single voice yelling their thing, and they each get their pedestal. Everyone's voice gets their pedestal, and they all have to speak their piece, and they all have to feel free and comfortable to say what they believe in their heart, and without retribution or anything like that. That's, to me, is the best thing. And a great leader, listens to all of these competing and is angry arguments amongst each other, and then when a decision is made, everyone puts their hat in their hand and look. Okay, everyone who doesn't agree, of course, right, with the decision he took from their argument's point, just okay, that's it, and it's over. If you really want, that's to me how I believe the best way a company or something like that leader. I'll have to be able to do that. And it's something that's been said. They had problems with some people wouldn't speak up in meetings because they got talked down and this and fear of this and that. And that's not a good thing. It's best that everyone feels comfortable, like America. America has the free speech. Everyone gets it. And then what I think is my own personal thing of courtesy of leadership, of the leader. If you respect your nation, your leader, and as soon as a decision is made, then it's like, well, accept the things you cannot change. And if you're not in the position to accept that change or to change that or anything, well, then there's no point in any more arguing. You said your piece. It wasn't accepted. Hey, there's another debate coming up. Don't worry. You may get the next one. And that's my opinion of how we need to pivot, because we're behind. We're losing, right? The democracies are losing to the autocracies right now. And we kind of need a strong lead. We need Trump, whether we like him or not. We need a Trump who's gonna tell you, that's it. I told you. But myself, I believe in the screaming and the yelling and the la 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 and giving with all the passion you can, and not fear that what you said will be used against you in any way until the decision's made, and it's like, okay, accept it. And that's the military and the military kind of doctrine that I believe could work really good You can still do your little bit of whatever, but it's best just to accept it and then move forward, and then pivot with whatever that decision was, as if it was your own. Accept that decision as if it was your own and it was good. And sometimes I fail on that, just like that one with the leaving it there. I see the reasoning behind it, see the reasoning, see that argument, accept it, and then everything will work better. As it's not like in the PRC where you don't get your voice in the beginning. You get your voice in the beginning. You don't get we all can't be leaders because it won't work. Because then it's, then the picture looks like, it's not a beautiful painting, right? If we have 50 different people still continuing, okay, this is the way the painting will be. No, it has to be that. And that's what I think that the media Trump has made it that way, because as the Japanese Prime Minister just said, everyone's scared of him. He's scary. Even in his will and his force of will makes it that way. But I think he only does that because he has to as leadership. Once it happens that everyone gets in line, I don't think he'll have to be like that anymore. But I think that's going forward is the way that the West has to, instead of debating after the decision is made, pretend that idea that was taken was yours, and eventually absorb it, and then you'll be doing that line, and to get us on the winning path again, and making Lake better for the average person again, right? Like bring in the 1950s without all the bad things of the 1950s that we've worked out of. The darker parts of the human nature a lot of it has been worked out of our society, in America, in Canada. What we did lose a lot of the manufacturing and the idea that sweat and toil is a good thing. Hard work and tired. This is a good thing for a lot of people, not for everybody. Not everyone needs that. There's certain people that are just naturally great people and living the life of luxury, and they're not, overeating or overindulging and all this stuff. But sometimes work and toil is the way to go. So I'm just talking to me and you, but I think that Trump is doing it out of force of will. He's creating that, but I hope that everyone's starting to get the message, so he doesn't have to be that all the time. He can be his natural demeanor, which is more of a listener and a calm, nicer person, right? But at first, right now, fear gets people to get in line, right?
We need to play our role and
to play our role,
endeavors and responsibility. As for the increase of our defense expenditures, it is not that we are told by the United States to do so. Japan, on our own decision and on our own responsibility, we need to increase our defense expenditures. But of course, we need to communicate and consult with the United States. But the responsibility is with Japan, and the decision is with Japan. Now, on the tariffs, that if it is mutually beneficial, tariffs need to be set. And as for Japan, as Mr. President has introduced to us, an unprecedented investment will be made from Japan to the United States, and so many jobs will be created. So $1 trillion is the target. And this will be to the benefit of the United States, but also to the benefit of Japan as well. Investment is mutually beneficial. So be it with U.S. Steel, as Mr. President says, it is not acquisition, it is investment. So the Japanese technology will be provided, and the better quality products will be manufactured in the United States, and the U.S. Steel will make products which will contribute not only to the United States and Japan, but also to the whole world. It is not one-sided. It will be reciprocal. It will be mutually beneficial. And I believe we were able to share on this, and that is the biggest result that I have seen today.
Thank you very much. Go ahead, please. Yeah.
Ladies and President, Edward Lawrence from Fox business. I wanted to ask you about that U.S. Steel deal. So you're saying that is this a restructuring of the deal that's happening, and then will you approve?
They're doing it as an investment, no longer a purchase.
Okay.
I didn't want it purchased, but investment I love. And they're going to do a big investment, subject to getting the deal done.
And that's
they'll be
something
doing
you
a
would
big.
approve, where the U.S.
I'm okay with that, sure.
And for the Prime Minister, what was your argument to the President related to U.S. Steel? And one more on tariffs, Mr. President, if I could. You said on tariffs that you'd like them to be reciprocal back and forth. What was the reception from the Japanese Prime Minister when you said that, or when you talked about it?
Well, we didn't discuss tariffs too much. We really discussed many other things, including the pipeline in Alaska, which I think is going to be maybe the most exciting thing with Doug and Chris. We discussed that at length, the pipeline. I mean, it seemed to be of great interest to them. We have potentially more oil and gas than in Saudi Arabia, just in Alaska. We have the most of any country in the world. It's a big asset for the United States, but we haven't used it. We go to Venezuela, we go to other places to take oil and gas, and we have more than anybody. It's an amazing phenomenon that took place over the last 4 years. Nobody.
Okay, so yeah, tariffs. I agree with Trump, and tariffs are good for the country because every country needs to make income from somewhere, right? So you put a tariff on, and it can create income for that government. Instead of taxing the people directly, it's taxing a good from another country, right? And then it'll make more incentive for someone within that country to say, hey, why don't I make it here? Because the little bit of imbalance, and it'll push the original country that made said product to lower it down to compete. So it's a good thing, and it's a way that the governments can take in an income. Remember, we've got on this cycle of taking off of the worker directly, okay, taking off of the worker's wages, and 40% of your wage goes to the government right now, and you're a worker. Whereas if you're an investor class, which is a very large percentage of the population, they don't pay these taxes. They don't pay 40% of their taxes on things like Warren Buffett said. He says, my secretary pays a higher percentage of her taxes than me. Now, the way is there. I like the one Finnish way, and I'm not advocating for it, but they have like a luxury tax. So certain items, you buy a Maserati, you pay a higher tax. Because if you're going to buy a Maserati, adding an extra $5,000 or $10,000, it's not going to be a big deal because you're already spending $300. It's not going to change people's minds, and it's been proven in these countries that it doesn't necessarily change someone's mind. They just got to pay more taxes to buy an item that's a luxury. So there's something else to help for the people. But the original idea of taking, you can go watch that on all these other news stations. That's all I'm going to put on for it. There's more other, just a piece is what I wanted to put. But taking half of the income of the working class people, whereas wealthy individuals are paying like very minimal percentage. It's worked for so long, but now that there's too many people of that income and they're making their face and putting money in investment and memes and anything, that's great. They got all this money in baloney crap that's not even helping their own people. And as incomes go down of the governments, they just take more and more off of someone's income, eroding their chance to even having a decent life. Remember, like it was the world wars that started the income tax. 10%, I think what it was. Now we're at like 40%. Like this unbelievable amount of your paycheck is now going to go to the government, and like Trump says, it's like a lot of Doge says. A lot of this money is just being wasted. There's kickbacks and shape, ways, and forms, right? Okay, I'll buy this. I don't care. It's not my money. Well, it is. That's why the government's taking so much off of the individual worker and not off the investor class, which is basically the feudalists, like the lords of our day, And they don't have to pay it, but the little people do, and larger and larger and larger percentages. As the companies, the feudal class, is also raising the price of every necessity that said person has to buy. What tariffs do is they give the person the opportunity to hold their own money. If they don't want to buy that good from made in Japan, there's another country or whatever. Say if there's a tariff on Japanese incense, okay, or Japanese what's a really traditional product they make? I don't want to say a weapon, but Japanese incense burners, okay? So if there's a tariff on that, and they have the highest quality incense burners, so I'll be willing to pay that. But if I'm like a penny pincher, I'll be like, well, forget it. I'll just buy the Indian one, the one made in India, that doesn't have the tariff and it's cheaper. It's not the high grade quality and traditional, the one I wanted, but as someone who has as you know what I mean, who's like concerned about the spending. Okay, how about you know what I mean? That's not a great example of a product, but we can use all these other products, say apples or whatever. They have those square watermelons. All of these things, they have an opportunity. The person has an opportunity not to buy it. Yes, it can go up if that product is only made in one country. Well, what about if they have a free trade agreement with another country? Well, then there's that other product. Maybe that company or something or that individual has an opportunity to buy. But when the government takes your money off of your income before you even receive it, because that's kind of the deal that the companies make, they just take it off your check and you don't even get it. You don't have to pay them. And then they work out the details in the end. It's a system that was okay in the beginning, but it's gotten so bloated that the worker, the people that are working and living the one cycle of life, are getting squeezed for the aristocrat class, the investor class, I like to call them. And there's nothing wrong with being an investor class person, but the thing is that if you're working on an hour rate, you shouldn't be the only one paying to keep the government going, and they're not doing very much for you. Tariffs eliminate a lot of that negativity that is created from that the negativity that's created from the income tax burden on working class. It's not on the investor class. Investors, capital gains, which what they put on capital gains, and then they scream so loud. Look, the liberals took off their capital gains increase. Have we ever seen a reduction in income tax? Never. Not provincially, not federally, ever. And people screamed. But they don't have the power, the weight. The investor class does. And they say, oh, it's the mom and pop person who just wants to do one thing. Yeah, that's 0.01% of the investor class. The 90% of the investor class is not worked an hour rate. Yeah, they probably work very hard and stuff like that, but it's a total different machine than working at a company, right? I think Trump is he's revolutionizing what's happening and where we're getting the money, and it's giving the people the tariffs is giving the people the opportunity to keep a bit more of their money, because the governments are all of them. Doge is going to reduce the spending, but all of them have more and more spending, larger and larger bills. There's been in the last decade, 250,000 employees in the federal government. Now it's 350,000. A new 100,000 people work for the government, where every single company in the world has had a reduction in the administrative class. We've had a very large increase, 30-40% increase. And so who's going to pay for that? They were going to increase, they probably did, increase income tax, because people don't have a say. But the investor class, no, we're not going to do that. Tariffs take money without taking out of the income taxes. That's where they always dip into the increase the income tax, because those people are the lowest propensity voters and lowest propensity that they can be divided. We can get one politician to say, get him, we'll all get him, and then they're like, yeah, he's our politician. It's divide and conquer, right? It's worked, and it's gonna work until it doesn't. Until all of a sudden people are like screaming for a different type of government, which I don't want to see in my country. You got any comments here? Probably. probably in there. I don't think I see all of my comments. It's very weird. My numbers are getting weird too. All right. So we have Bob Ray. I said Bill Ray. I'm sorry. Yeah, Casey David. Whatever. It's Friday. I'm gonna go to my thing here. I'll just read a couple of your comments. So Trump is allowing. I think he did a really good thing. The Biden administration didn't allow them to buy it, but he allowed them to do heavily invest in the country, into the U.S. steel, I should say. A deal for protection. No, the Japanese are buying their own defense system, and they're increasing huge amounts. In the protection racket, you guys are going to be looking for other money, and it ain't going to be in the protection racket. The AI is changing everything so fast. It's people won't be able to keep up with the rapid thing. There's been a huge. I recommend you guys like this. Duchesne. I know I'm saying his name wrong. The head RCMP guy. Finally, we have one that I believe at least is a worker. He actually got money. This is like you can tell he's not a politician because he was on CTV. I only go on CTV on YouTube, so whatever. Maybe there's a longer part of it, but he goes. She's like, "Do you need more money?" And he's like, "No, we got lots of money. There was a big increase." I'm like, what are you doing? You're supposed to be like the farmer. While it's raining, you're complaining about the rain. We need more rain, right? It's not to pick up farmers, but that's just a natural way, a political way. You're supposed to say we need more money, but he was honest. He's like, no, there was a big increase. We have money. You could see he got all excited. He's like, oh, we got all this new kit. And he even said, I agree with him. We don't need the military. And the military shouldn't be on our borders. Shouldn't be working in our borders. They should be training around here. Do training, but not. The only actions they should need is to reinforce when the police need the extra. And stuff like that. It's a very bad path, right? And then what can happen is then the military budget. Well, then the military can say, well, look, we're spending here. We need more of that. No, it's. And then when something happens overseas, they'll be say, well, we have these domestic problems, right? America has a southern border problem right now that maybe will take at least a mission. I don't know. I don't know how big of that deal is, but in Canada right now, it seems that, and this is what the RCMP commissioner said, that we don't need it, and he's got the technology, and there was a big influx of money, and now they're spending it, and he's just like, we have to make sure we spend it wisely. So, and it's true. It's easy to spend your money not wisely, right? You get a big chunk of cash and you just go, and you have to. So I bought this book, and it's like you have to do it. When you're about to buy something, think: do I need this? What will I do without it? What is the alternative? While you have the money, everything's ready to go, and then you're just like, oh, I guess I don't. I have 12 hats. That's I believe is how the how it should go. I have to put this on because I broke my glasses. Wow, I gotta fix them again. Because this lights. So, what else do you got to say? Oh, welcome to the live chat. Trump is a definite aspect of a really good machine that's happening. He's changing everything, and it's bringing everything come back to America, investor class, and we're going to start seeing building around here. It's going to come with a little bit more pollution and stuff like that, but we're going to be building it cleaner and better than we ever have. So it'll be, once again, America and also Canada will be a place that everyone will look to for like, oh, that's how we do it. Let's copy what they do. Instead of what happened like in China, like, oh my God, these electric cars, like they're producing them cheaper, better, faster than us right now. I don't know if they're better actually. I have no idea about that part. But they're cheaper and they look pretty cool. And then they had to tariff them because they're like, they're going to dump our market. Like it definitely had a lot of it was subsidized heavily, so it was kind of a mission, right? An economic mission to dump these guys. I think Biden saved it, or whoever within the administration saved us from losing our whole car industry. The plan was this close to coming in, and we would have lost in Canada and the States and Mexico would have lost it because these cars were going to come in at $5,000, $6,000. Like within a year, and they had like the shipping capacity to just dump them on the market. And so, you know, people always vote with their wallet. And when times are tougher, when your home's over $1 million, and you're like, I don't. This is to happen with the kit car, okay? The K car. Chrysler was running out of. They were going to be out of business, okay? So this Ayatollah, I think was his name, Italian fella, 1981, took it over. And he made the Granada, the brown Granada K car, an ugly car that got you cheaply from point A to point B. And it saved the company because everyone didn't care about looks. They did care about getting from point A to point B cheaply. And it happened. And it was like, boom, there we go. Chrysler became a company. I think it only came in like one color, brown, or brown. It was, they pulled like a Ford move, right? And so Henry Ford, that is. So it was an idea that I think that they were going to do was just dump these cheap cars, and patriotism would have gone out the window for most people who were penny pinching, or whatever you want to call it, who were low on discretionary, low on income, discretionary income, right? That they're like, well, you know what? I just need to get to work. I'll buy the $5,000, $10,000 Chinese car. What do I care? It works. It gets me there. Great. And it could have destroyed the market. Now, the reason why they were so cheap, it was so heavily subsidized and this and that. It's not that it was better. You know what I mean? It was that it was heavily subsidized. And they have a different industry there. You have like over 100 companies all competing, and patents now. So they rapidly sped up how fast these electric car companies could deal. Because one company does something, they're all going to copy it. And it was happening so fast, right? And the reason it could be done is because they all were apparently, I don't know the whole details, they were all apparently heavily subsidized. So no one's complaining about, hey, we made this one thing. All of our work and research into this one idea, one aspect of a million aspects of electric car got stolen from all these other companies. They were already getting subsidized to keep them all spending it afloat anyway. So, and had a rapid thing. That's part of how that subsidy worked. And so the general competition was artificial because it was subsidized by the government, and they were going to dump. The plan that I read was they were going to dump. How I read it, I mean, was they were going to dump. They were ready to. They had the shipping, everything ready to dump these cars on our market. And in 3 years, we know what would have happened. Like, the last downturn when GM and all these flew to go Obama, and Obama gave them crap for flying in their personal jets. These companies, because their stock market, Ford is a different scenario because Ford is still it's still a private company. But all these ones that are stock market companies, they would be gone, because once their stock market value goes to nothing, they've lost all this money, they owe money. It's just, and it could have destroyed most of the car industry in the companies in America. The factories still would be there, but Rust Belt. So it was a really, really close call. Biden saved it. I don't know. I think the Trumpian may have been behind that part of it. Like, I don't know, or at least something, because it would happen. It happened very, very fast. I think that it was it. Now there's Bob Ray, which isn't Bill Ray. Sorry, I call him Bill Ray. He is a Canadian diplomat extraordinaire. speaking at the Toronto Metropolitan University on United issues, and I always have to acquiesce to someone who knows more about the parts of it, and he's one of them. You know, most of the time, right? To those who just seem to know more. All right, just. But the last point is like Japan and America have $300 billion. Oh, another thing is that he said LNG. They want to buy the LNG. Remember that the largest LNG, liquefied natural gas plant in Canada was built by Japan, $40 billion. It'll probably be more than that now due to inflation. But they built it in Canada, and now this shift looks like, well, Trump just kind of made a deal. Like I think it's still like being worked out, but there's going to be a deal to buy it off of America now because Canada has been denying the new expansion of these plants for all kinds of reasons. So, and most likely it'll be from Anwar, which is in Alaska. It's a park, beautiful area, and there's all kinds of natural gas up there. And there's a lot they know of, but I don't think it's been fully explored. I don't think I honestly think that once they go to these huge resort, like huge easy areas to get it, there'll be people, prospectors, going out and finding more, and just a lot more. I have a feeling that there's a lot up there, and so it'll be on the coast, up in Alaska and the coast up there. And as technology has grown, these icebreakers and all this stuff, before it used to be very, very difficult to be in the Arctic. Now with our technology, we can open it up because our technologies are there. We don't have to have 40 inch thick steel. There's angles and there's other things that we've worked out in technologies. So going into the north isn't what it was in the 70s. So it most likely looks like under Trump it's going to like really expand, and looks like Japan's going to be the buyer, because we have to build pipelines, and no one knows if we are going to. Though I think that the whole shift of the liberals shift has changed. We have a big change. Oil pipelines, natural gas, LNG. When Trudeau said there's no business plan for it, I think that now is not the opinion of it anymore. And I'll give Trudeau something today. He did a pretty good speech today. It's I call it the Andrew Scheer moment. Andrew Scheer became a better politician after he lost the election. Forever I'm going to call it the Scheer moment, the Andrew Scheer moment. He was a decent, good politician, but after he lost, he's a lot better of a politician. And Trudeau's having a Scheer moment right now. He's better, an Andrew moment, we'll call it, St. Andrew moment. He's become better after he's resigned. He resigned as the Liberal, so there's going to be a new Liberal leadership race until So he's still prime minister, of course, right? He didn't resign as prime minister. So but next election, it's not So definitely, it's a great thing going forward. We're going to have a trade mission is what he's talking about. He's going to send it to Europe, and then he spoke on his little speech today about going to the Asia pivot. There's a pivot to Asia. Asia has built up, so it's time to start. So Trump has got ahead of us on Japan already. He just did it. Son of a gun. Like I always have to respect a brilliant politician. So he got ahead of us, and Japan is probably the best person to sell to because they're a stable culture. And everyone loves their culture. I don't think anyone has a bad feeling about Japan. I don't think it's possible, really. The good people, good culture. I like their culture. Even guys, like there's the samurai culture, and it's about being a stoic and all these great things, kind of. And then there's the the other, their paintings, and there's so much about Japan that's liked and revered. And they're rich. They're really, really, really rich, and they make all kinds of really cool products we want. It's not just Nintendo's anymore. So he got ahead of us on that. It seems. It doesn't mean that forever, but there are all these other countries that are the same thing. The Philippines is one. The New Zealand is another. I think Australia also needs a lot of our energy. They have a lot of mining, but I'm not sure how much LNG and stuff like that they have. Chile is one country. All these countries in this agreement, this Trans-Pacific Partnership Agreement, they all need our stuff, right? Our natural gas, LNG, and all that. So it's something that Trudeau said he's going to do a trade mission for, and he's about to. They're going to work on that, and it's like I said, it's the Andrew moment, the Andrew Scheer moment. Let's listen to Bob.
Right away and say, oh yeah, Canada, here you go, telling us what to do. What are you doing? And we have no credibility with those countries unless we join in the fight together and say it's a mutual fight. We all know we have to do it. It's miraculous that we've been able to sign treaties, but the problem with the treaties is there isn't a single environmental treaty that we've signed on climate change that has an enforcement mechanism built into it.
And we've signed treaties that do have enforcement mechanisms, yes, and they're not very useful right now, are they?
We're not able to use them because the enforcements don't work. And that's one of the central dilemmas of international law at the moment.
Let me ask you about another trend that's taken root in Canada. If you ask Canadians, if you poke them, they'll say, internationally, militarily, we're peacekeepers. That's what we do. We're the peaceniks. But that fashion is changing now. First of all, the peace dividend after the fall of the Berlin Wall seems like a distant memory given what's happened in Ukraine and elsewhere. So did Trump and his predecessors, it's not just him, have a point when they said we were slackers on military spending? And how are we going to address that? How much of that do you take when you're in the U.S.?
Oh, in the U.S., a lot. Of course. I mean, everybody, it's an easy target. I do think that, and it wasn't just one party, it wasn't just one prime minister. I think that we all, in the United States, did it as well for a while, and then they came back after President Clinton left office. But
let me refocus the question. Has your thinking changed?
Your question is, no, my thinking has not changed. Okay. I have been a consistent advocate of understanding that defense, development, and diplomacy go together. And I just wrote a piece about this in a book that's just come out this week on security policy. I have been a very consistent, strong concern about security, about its importance to us. That's when I did the Air India report. It was a feature of that report. I served on the Security Intelligence Review Committee for 5 years. I know I've always had a very strong view that you can't let down the side. And frankly, that also includes Canada's defense support for the United Nations, which I hope will show more signs of life.
But spending more on the military is a hard sell in this democracy, isn't it?
I don't think it is. I think you see, the politics is not about counting heads. Politics is about turning heads. It's about convincing people that there's some things that they might not have thought or it might not be their first reaction. But I think if you look now at any assessment I've seen of public opinion, I think more and more people feel that Canada needs to do more, and I think we are doing more. I just read this morning a reminder that Canada's defense spending has increased by 20% in the last year. So when you look at our security situation in the far north, which means we have to take it seriously. I mean, climate change is completely changing the dynamic in northern development, on the water and on land. And together with working with indigenous communities, we need to make sure that we are playing a strong role in Arctic security. And I think that's why that's become an increasingly important issue for this government, and I think for any government in Canada.
You talked about us being a middle power.
And you did, but I
used the word, but I knew you were going to do that. I opened that up to you. I got to be careful. I really have to watch myself. So Canadian diplomats talk about us being a middle power, and you're one of them. So Diplomat, that is. We like to think of ourselves, your prime minister said, I think, and it became a commercial slogan, that the world needs more Canada. I even have the bookmark here. This was in fashion a few years ago. The world needs more Canada. But the world has changed since we started saying that almost a decade ago. And I'm wondering if Canada needs a little less of that Canada Boy Scout spirit in a world where not just Donald Trump is giving us a hard time, but Russia has given us a hard time. China has given us a very hard time. We talked about that the last time you were here. We don't talk about China as much. We're now focused on our friends in America.
I'm happy to talk about China if you want.
We have had trouble with India. We had trouble with Saudi Arabia a few years ago when we were talking to them about human rights, when we talked to the Indians about human rights. So given that our flank here is exposed with America, are we too focused on a kind of a Jimmy Carter view of human rights is top of mind for Canada, and do we need to look out for ourselves more, our economic interests, so that we don't become isolated?
Oh, I think our economic, we have values and we have interests, and that's who we are as people, that's who we are as individuals, and that's who we are as a country. It was a very famous British Prime Minister in the 19th century, Lord Palmerston, who said, we don't have friends, we have interests.
Right.
And that's a kind of blunt imperial view of life. But there is an element of that I think we all have to reflect on and think about. With respect to your point, I wouldn't, I take issue with it a bit, but I'm going to just focus on where we need to be. It's not about us. It's not about Canada. We can't actually, on our own, we can't actually do really very much at all. We can do a lot by making agreements and reaching out to other countries and reaching across borders and reaching around the world very effectively. And as soon as you do that, as soon as you engage in conversation, by definition, you're having to listen and learn. So you got to do more of that. It's not about that the world needs more Canada. We need the world too, and we also need others to help us do what we think is important. And that, I think, is really where I think our diplomacy and our foreign policy is going, and where it needs to keep going. And that is, it needs to talk about all of these things together and try to overcome some of the challenges that we have.
I guess I'm just wondering if we need to be more, it's a global question, so I'm not pinning you down on specifics, but do we need to be a little more hard-headed and pragmatic about protecting those economic interests from retaliation by China, Saudi Arabia, when they pulled out all their medical students suddenly, India, etc.?
Well, okay, let me just talk. If you want me to talk in general terms, I'd say two things. You always have to think pragmatically. You have to think in terms of your values, but you also, in life, you think about, well, how am I going to do this? And how am I going to get it done? So learning how to be pragmatic is pretty important. And part of that is also learning how to be less impulsive and more consequential in your thinking and in your acting, and thinking carefully about what are the consequences if we do this. And it's really challenging when you have a lot of governments that themselves act very impulsively.
Or politically, in terms of perhaps, all foreign politics is domestic politics sometimes, and we have a lot of diasporas in this country.
We do, but we should take advantage of that in every way we possibly can. And people who say to me, well, people who come to Canada should leave the stuff behind, and I say, well, the British and French didn't do that very well, did they? And so why would you think anybody else would? And so, Canada was born out of a war between two countries that were at war all over the world. And so we were just one of the playgrounds that they would have these wars.
But you can't pretend that we have the largest Ukrainian diaspora. That perhaps motivated Brian Mulroney to be the first to recognize Ukraine. We have the biggest Tamil diaspora. We have from Sri Lanka. We have the biggest Sikh diaspora.
We joined the First World War because we were part of the British Empire, and we joined the Second World War because we were still part of the British Empire in a way, and because we felt it was our duty to do that. And so all I'm saying to you, Martin, is this is not just now. This is a long-term issue and reality of Canada. But we must also recognize that our relationships with all the countries in the world are really, on balance, greatly strengthened by the fact that the world is in us and we are in the world, and therefore this is what we are. And so, yeah, every step we take, we have to be aware of this will affect opinion here and there. But you can't let domestic politics drive everything, because then you're ignoring other consequences and the other realities that you face in the world. And I think that's something that every political party has had to learn, and I think it's something we all have to be aware of. I know very well that there are some subjects, when I talk about them, I immediately will get a reaction from both communities in Canada saying, why didn't you say this? Why did you say that? Why did you? And I make a point of sending the same email to everybody and saying, this is where we are as a country. This is the steps these are the steps we are taking. This is where we need to go. And if it puts me at odds or puts the government at odds with the hard edges of each community, then that's life. But you can't let your politics be driven, your foreign politics, to be driven only by domestic activity, because you lose your perspective on what the global impact is. And my job as an ambassador in the UN is to constantly remind the government that, wait a minute, this is the global impact of this. Let's think it through before we just do the impulsive thing. Because sometimes, particularly with public opinion polling changing every minute, with people, on social media happening every second, it's all like instant reaction. And sometimes you have to say, slow down, please, take the weekend, let's think this through. And I do that to myself quite a lot too. I'm just not a bad thing to think about.
So the advice is put your phone down. I'm looking at my phone because I'm looking at Slido. So I want to just remind folks that, and let's see what we have here. Don't make fun of me for looking. I'm not distracted. Okay, lots of questions. Reminder to use the QR code to sign in if you do want to ask that question. I have one more quick one before I take a tally here, and that is last time I saw you a couple of weeks ago, we talked about Haiti, a subject that is near and dear to your heart and very close to our country, and there's a diaspora as well. And there is a huge human rights issue that you were very focused on a few years ago before the rest of the world blew up and kind of forgot about Haiti. You mentioned something interesting to me that Marco Rubio is the new Secretary of State in the U.S., who's doing some interesting things to foreign aid and so on. But he also knows where Haiti is because he's from Miami. Do you have any hope at all that you can engage the United States in a constructive way on Haiti, and any other ideas how to clear up or help on that mess?
Well, on the answer to the first question, absolutely, yes. I do have. In fact, I'm going down to Washington next week for a couple of days to start talking together with a number of my colleagues from other countries. Canada chairs the advisory committee on Haiti to ECOSOC, which is I'm also the president of this year. And so we're going down to talk about what's happening. But we're also going to get a lot of briefings from senior officials in the U.S. And it's obviously the new administration is not entirely in place yet. We all understand these transitions take a bit of time. But it's really important that we not lose focus on Haiti, again, because it's in our interest to do so. It's not just an issue about what's happening in one country of 12 million people. It's about what's happening in an entire region where drugs and trafficking of drugs is a big problem, where the trafficking of people is a big problem, and where the insecurity in the region is a challenge. And
I've read that fentanyl is coming from Canada in huge quantities to the United States.
It's not. That's not the issue. But there are other aspects of it's really about what happens with gangs and with the trafficking of arms, as well as drugs and people. That is, when it starts to happen in a region, and when some of the fabric of the region starts to fray, and when gangs are able to play on that in a big way, and when corruption is a problem and an issue, then you have a problem. And we can't just say, well, that if we close the door, we keep people away, that'll solve the problem. No, that's not the answer. You have to figure out how to engage successfully. We have been able to keep our level of engagement high in Haiti, even though it's not always on the headlines, and we will continue to do that. And that's one other aspect of policy that I think is really important, and that is persistence. We tend to come and go. When I say we, I just mean human beings. We tend to come and go because of impulse, because of, oh, that's the shiny object. Oh, what do you? And I keep coming back to this point because I think one of the things about politics that's really happened is that the social media has made deliberate thought very difficult. It means that thinking is short term, reactions are short term. Everybody's tied to their machines. This is that. It's harder and harder to get people, not just kids, not just young people, but older people, to get people to concentrate.
You're on Twitter or X a lot.
With a purpose.
But it's pretty thoughtful. But I will give you a nod, not just on that, but you repurposed your BlackBerry years ago to actually write a book.
Yes, I did.
So would you recommend that? Don't tweet, just write a book on your BlackBerry.
Well, BlackBerrys are not a big item these days. I gather from what
it was the BlackBerry era.
Even I've flipped over to Apple, but
I'm still on Android.
Yeah. Well, I can't help you. But I really think that there's a lot more to this problem than I think we're letting on. Back in the 80s, there was a guy named Neil Postman, who was a sociologist from the States, who wrote a really, I thought, very provocative book about how our attention span is being impacted by infotainment and by the drama of and it was a book about television and the impact of television on politics, which was very insightful. But now this is like multiplied, by algorithms.
If you knew this about impulse control, all that many years ago, why didn't you set up Facebook and Instagram and Twitter? You could have been so much richer than you are today. Okay, Suzanne Miller asks, how much can Canada distance itself from the U.S. economically and militarily? And should we seek closer ties with other countries such as Mexico, the UK, and the EU? I suspect your answer to the latter will be yes, but the first part of her question is intriguing. How much can we distance ourselves from a country that we are so close together with?
Well, I think the answer is it's challenging. I think everybody, because of current events, everybody's very aware of the need to create alternatives to the challenge that we face. We've relied not only on American security for our umbrella, we've relied on access to the U.S. market as the basis for our economic growth. And at the very least, we need to understand that we are being told very strongly, we will continue to provide security to us, and that will help you, but you got to do more. And I think that's a totally legitimate argument. I don't think that's an illegitimate argument by any. And President Trump is not the first.
No.
I mean, I've heard this on every visit to Washington for a long, long time. So that's one point. And I think people need to be aware of that. But on the economic side, it is challenging to just turn the switch on an economy. You can't do that easily. You have to take the time to figure out what are the other markets, how do you build them, how do we strengthen them. But I do think the one thing that is strong for Canada is a couple of things that I would say. One is we are a highly educated country, and that is partly because of immigration, ironically. It's partly because of the immigrants that have come to the country have tended to be people with a high skill level and high levels of education. But not just that. I mean, there's no comparison. When I went to, and I know this fact from my report that I did for Ontario many years ago, when I went to university in the 60s, 8% of the population of the kids in Ontario, high school leavers, were able to go to university. And that's before the college system was really growing. So now if you take colleges and universities together, we're up close to 50%, which is a dramatic transformation of higher education. It's just a huge change that's taken place, which I think most people would say is amazing. It's great. But you got to keep it up. You got to keep it accessible. You got to keep it working. I think that's a strength for our economy. I think it's a major strength that we have. The second major strength we have is that we're a free trading country. We've become a freer trading country. We've become open to the possibilities of trade. We sign trade agreements with just about anybody. I'll be stopped in the hall of the UN saying, great, we just signed a trade agreement, and I'll say, oh, that's wonderful. I had no idea, but it's really good that this happened. And so it's making a big difference in our relationships with a whole number of countries who are coming to us and saying, we want to join this, we want to be part of it. And that's where I think our psychology is really quite different from the psychology of people say. And it's not because we're better than anybody else, it's because don't forget, we rely on trade for over half of our GDP. And over 70% of our trade is with the United States. Okay. And in some parts of the country, it's even higher than that. So just do the math that our GDP would be nowhere near where it is if we didn't trade. The United States is much less reliant on trade than we are. Germany is much less reliant on. There's many countries that are much less reliant on trade.
They have the home market.
They have the home market, and we don't have as big a home market as we need to have.
You opened the door to a question on tuition. Our premier in this province 7 years ago, one of his first acts was to cut tuition by 10%. I'm asking because, as he pointed out, he co-chaired or chaired a commission with Bill Davis, I believe, on education and university post-secondary education in Toronto for the Dalton McGuinty government. So Doug Ford cut tuition by 10%. He's a populist, you may have heard. And he has frozen it ever since, 7, 8 years. And so universities and colleges are starving for cash flow. And and we had 2 politicians here this week saying that they also would not raise tuition. Doug Ford didn't make the universities whole. They say they would. What's your thought about the tuition conundrum?
I haven't changed my mind since 2005 when I wrote the report. I was actually asked by Dalton McGuinty to do this report because he had made a promise to freeze tuition when he ran. And I don't think I'm giving any secrets away when I say that what he then said to me was, can you help me with this? Because I said to him at the time, I said, you're really going to regret that commitment because it doesn't work. And I don't believe it works. What I think does work is you really need to sustain and support the universities. And you really need to see it as a long-term investment for society. And I deeply regret that we do not have enough of a championing of higher education, colleges and universities, research and development, graduate studies, the whole schmear. That's such a critical area of our society. We also need to do more to ensure that we are targeting our financial assistance for students in such a way that it really gets the help they need to the lowest income students. My problem with freezing a blanket freeze, and no political party will agree with me. I mean, I accept that.
We've asked them all.
Yeah, I know. I mean, that's fine. I'm just saying to them, if you persist in doing this, you will end up with a constantly challenged and less than magnificent post-secondary system, and we can have that system. We're so close to having that system if we can just get the numbers and contributions right. We have always relied on tuition and on private support, philanthropic support, and we've relied on government funding. And government funding as a share of that package has consistently gone down, except for when the McGuinty government agreed with my recommendations, and it led to the single largest increase in support for higher education that the province has ever seen in 2 years after the report. Unfortunately, it was not maintained. And then governments got into, let's fiddle with the tuition thing. And you say, the trouble with tuition is that there are many students who can afford it, and there's some who can't, and families. And so you need to target your support to those families that can't support it and make sure that, in effect, it's a net zero for many, many thousands of students. And that's the way it should be. And I don't know. It's a tough thing to convince people, but education it's not only it's an investment in yourself, And so don't think that there isn't a significant advantage to students from having an education. And don't forget that a large part of the population doesn't have the same access that you do. So it's not unreasonable to say you should contribute something. Now, there is an argument that I think more people are looking at and saying, well, if we're approaching universality or closer to universality in access to higher education, let's make it the same way. We don't charge people to go to high school. We don't charge people to go to primary school. You say, fine, but you got to then look at, you got to fund it. You got to fund it in a proper way. And universities and colleges are stuck in the middle of this political debate.
Without a constituency to advocate.
Well, they have a constituency, and another story, but I mean, they do have a big constituency. We just don't go after them. We don't really embrace this learning culture as the heart and lifeblood of our economy and of our life as a country and as a province. And we really should be doing that.
Here's a question from Shervin. Many students are interested in world politics and want to get involved. What do you think? How can you support extracurriculars like the Model United Nations or TMU's Model UN?
Well, I mean, I speak at these institutions all the time. I do it virtually and I do it in person. I'm speaking at I'm almost embarrassed to say this. I'm speaking at the U of T event on Sunday because I was invited. And so I'm glad to do that. I'm very happy to be there. There is a real hunger, I find, with students around the country. I spoke last week. In fact, my colleagues are sort of saying, when are you going to be in New York? I said, well, I mean, I was in Quebec and in Laval last week, 2 weeks ago, and in Winnipeg at the Human Rights Museum. And there's a huge appetite in the country for international issues, huge appetite, huge level of interest, and that's shared by younger people. And I think when it comes to, for example, the Sustainable Development Goals, which Liz would very much want me to talk about, and I do want to talk about them. I'm going to be going to an event tonight to talk about them. They really are the common sense of humanity. We don't want people living in poverty. We don't want people living in hunger. We want people to have access to education. We understand that climate change is a global issue and needs a response from everybody. We believe in peace and security. We know it requires global investment. These are not abstract things that are invented by people in New York or in other capitals around the world. They're very much in the national interest of our country to embrace them and to be part of them. And I'm proud that Prime Minister Trudeau accepted the invitation from the Secretary General to be a champion of the SDGs, and we must continue to do that. I think there's a tremendous interest globally in these issues, and there's one other thing I'd like to see governments do, both provincially and federally, and that is provide more opportunities for students in the years after university to do some international service and to engage globally and to be able to do that much more effectively. Intern programs, other ways, paid, not just volunteer, but paid programs. I think we need to deal with that because one of the most challenging times that students face, I say this to any students in the audience, it's not when you're here, it's when you leave here, because it's the gap between here and, quote, the real world, as we say. And that's where I think we need to be more creative in how we can facilitate that. I get emails, I get, people, because I'm on social media, it's not hard to find me, Somebody can send me a message. And my staff are very aggravated because they say, you answered these things. I said, yeah, I try to. I mean, it's hard.
You can give out your cell phone number like Doug Ford.
No. I said, no, I'm not going to do that. But believe me, anybody wants to find me, you can find me. Without any difficulty. But it's challenging.
Can I ask you, before we run out of time, I'm going to circle back to questions in a minute. We'll go into a bit of overtime with your permission, and that is to talk a little bit about this place, Ontario.
Yes.
So this 1990 election, you remember it?
I do.
Snap election.
Yeah.
Any thoughts about the perils of snap early elections by premiers who are very high in the public opinion polls?
Well, I'm going to be, first of all, I will not answer questions or deal with anything to do with current politics in Ontario. I won't do that at all.
We're talking history here.
No, we're talking history. Well, it's interesting because, when Mr. Peterson, just to remind everybody for whom these years are either non-existent or else a kind of haze, 85, the Conservatives were defeated for the first time in 42 years. Mr. Peterson became the premier, because the NDP signed an accord with him to form a government, and he did, with conditions attached, which by and large he lived up to. And looking back on it now, I realize the reason he lived up to it is because we had money. The money was flowing after the recession of 81. There was a lot of revenue flowing between 81 and 89. And then 87, he called an election after the accord was over and won a huge majority. And when it came back, I said to my team and to the caucus, and we were chatting about it, said, we have to be prepared for an election after 3 years. And they said, why? I said, because he's got a big majority, and he's going to want to pick a moment when he thinks he can keep that or close to it and won't lose too much.
Lock it in.
Because under our system, the first past the post system, the number of seats you have grossly exaggerates your actual level of support in the population. So we had, I can't remember the number of seats, 93 seats or something. Had a lot of seats. And we had hardly any. So that it was a vast, huge mass of support, liberals, provincial liberals behind Mr. Peterson. And we were like 19 to 16, I think, the two opposition parties. So, so we started just getting ready. And look,
what's the risk that Peterson took?
The risk was that people wouldn't realize that he was calling it early because the economy was turning south very fast. And what I think he didn't realize that there was almost a perfect storm of economic shifting, which is sort of like, the weather. All of a sudden you feel, that there's a day in August when you sort of say, not summer anymore. You wake up in the morning, it's cold and it's crisp. And there's that kind of shift in the wind, and we have a cottage, and you can see the wind's coming from the north. You say, the wind is changing. And I'll say this to my grandkids. They said, Papa, it's nice. It's summer. Like, what are you talking about? I said, no, it's And the same thing happened to Mr. Peterson. He was ahead. The first day of the election, he was ahead in the polls by 25 points. And I can remember campaigning. I did something first of all, I said to Arlene, before the election, I said, this is the last election, and we're going to go out with a bang and have fun and enjoy. I'm going to be more relaxed, because I was quite tense and edgy in many ways. And so I got to learn how to kind of just go with the flow. And first day the election was called, we went out from Queen's Park and did something which you're never supposed to do. And that it was an unscripted visit to Kensington Market. And there were no beaters, not like beaters we call. People go out and say, Bob Ray's coming, and they said, I don't want to see that man ever, ever. Say, okay, we won't stop at your store, it's okay. We didn't have that, we didn't do that. So we just walked down the street.
You were flying blind.
Yeah, flying blind, it was crazy, and everybody was very nervous. And we got amazing response. And I said, that's fantastic, it's terrific, that's just great. And the next day we saw the overnights, and I was still 25 points behind. And they said, whoa. But within about a week or two, you could feel it. You could just feel the change. Crowds started to grow. People started turning up. There are ways how you're doing. In the old politics, much less scripted than today. If you couldn't fill a hall, you knew you were going south.
It was pretty scripted even then. Quick question.
But less so.
Quick question about history. When you're driving on the Highway 407 toll road,
yes.
What are your thoughts about then? And because some people are saying, let's take the tolls off, but you can't comment on that. But what do you think about the highway that you built?
I'm very proud that we were able to build the largest infrastructure project in the Commonwealth at the time. It was a big project, and very proud that we were able to get it off the ground and get it going. True story. I am a believer in tolls. Road pricing.
So am I.
And road pricing is something that if I hadn't traveled so much as a kid, because my dad was a diplomat, and hadn't traveled in opposition, I wouldn't have seen that, the Singapore is doing it, that Hong Kong is doing it. They're doing it around the world. Why don't we embrace this idea? It's a good concept. And the caucus was not thrilled with these thoughts. And I said, well, what if we build a new road with a toll? Okay, we got it going. We got it up. And it's been a huge success. In fact, I mean, it's a big joke in the family, because when I came home one day when I was premier, Arlene and the kids had put a piece of string across the stairs with a little box there saying, "You want to go upstairs, Dad? You got to put money. Got to put money in."
A price signal.
Family secret. She was not a fan of tolls. She thought this is all not a good idea.
Yeah, I how much I know, it's just a few of us here. Well, at least that's what it says on my screen. It's a few people against tolls. Well, I'm not. I'm agreeing with most of the things he says. Is like, and this is something I'm going to try to acquiesce to follow. Is like, hey, don't talk about the election, the Ontario election. Not trying to cover it. First of all, I'm not on any team. Second of all, I'm not affiliated as a what do you call it? As a journalist for it to cover it. So I don't think Ontario actually has a list to go on. I'm going to double check that just to make sure. Sorry. Bob Ray just is a good force for a source of knowledge, a deep well of knowledge of politics, and he's always been calm. Like that Kensington Market story was really good, and it shows that, hey, it's a slow build, and it's not always about the big bangs, the big moments, and you continue to do those moments, you're basically going to erode the real thing what you're making. In politics, the big bangs. Remember, politicians, they're always changing, right? And there's a reason for that. People get tired of the one person yelling and hating that other person. They can't last doing that for so long. It's hard on that person, and it's hard on their fans, right? I have to get a new look at that type. So he's really. And with tolls, I also like when we build a highway, right? And hey, everyone's for cars and everything like that. I'm not against driving cars, but when we build a highway or a subway, they charge the people money to get on it, right? And it's just like everyone's like, of course you do. Well, why aren't we doing that with roads? Roads, especially like when there's already a route to get there. A free route, and then there's a new highway. There's that the highway, the 407 one, and it's a toll one. There's a company that makes money, and it's a very, very well run highway because of the tolls, I imagine. It's a business, and I think it's okay. In the States, there's all kinds of tolls and stuff like that. I think that's, to me, is the way to maintain certain roads, and it makes sense to me that why is the whole society, we pay a lot of money in roads. Why is the whole society paying the highways as well when only a certain percentage are using it? And those certain percentages that use it should. Like, okay, should the government help and subsidize it? Of course. But should it be 100% taxpayers for highways for the very small percentage of people that would use it in the province of that? I think the tolls are the way to build the infrastructure of certain infrastructure, that we're all accepted already. Would anyone accept a free bus route? The people would be up in arms and screaming in the streets, "Oh my God, a free bus!" And it doesn't cost that much of a city's budget, but people would be up in arms about that. Well, why is the highways all of a sudden? We put a lot of money into highways, lots, and having a toll. First of all, it'll be a company organizing it. Usually, the way I've seen it was there's a company that organized the highway in Ontario, and they built the road so it maintains longer. Like the structure of the road is stronger, and so it's more durable and lasting of a road instead of there's some beautiful highways in Ontario, but they're constant maintenance, constant laying down. So when you have a business aspect to it, it helps, I believe. They look at other aspects of it, and that's I think that would help it. Also getting technology to make us be able to build roads cheaper is a very large factor in this. It should be looked at. And tolls are annoying, though. We all know it. But if there's another route, like, hey, if it's just only one route to a town and to toll it, that's kind of not good, right? But if there's an alternate route, you know what I mean? You're making a better route. Yeah, it worked. It worked out. Worked with that. You're like, hey, it shaves off an hour. I'll pay the $20 to take this highway. That's good for that people. But when you're building alternate route after alternate route because of traffic jams, well, it's kind of we're putting a lot of money into roads, and we do need roads, municipal, provincial, and federal roads. There should be some that are not pay, but when you're making things better. I like the idea of allowing companies in to work in partnership with the government, and you're only paying you know what I mean. But it's not a happy subject to talk about. No one's of course likes that. I personally didn't like it. I'm like, oh my God, I got a bill, $7. I got to pay for that highway. I didn't realize it was so pricey, and I complained myself. But then the next time I was aware of it, and I took it anyway because it was like, you know what? That section was nice. There was like farm fields and this and that and no traffic, and we did our 100, and it was fine. So yeah, this is one of the best politicians, and no one I expect to agree with it in the chat, but hey.
And so, I mean, I think the big, and I'll just say this because it's not current politics. I think Mike Harris is, I think the decision to basically pour concrete down the Eglinton subway was a disaster. It was a truly stupid decision, and now we still haven't finished the Eglinton subway. For those of you who don't know, it was started in 1992, and it was ready. It was like we got the machinery going, and it was being built, and he stopped it. Like, didn't just stop it, but he prevented anybody else from doing it. So the process of rebuilding it has proven to be
booby-trapped it.
Yeah, exactly. So, but that's important. But the decision to sell the 407 in order to meet a short-term target of being able to go into an election saying, hey, that huge deficit that Bob Ray had?
It's gone.
It's gone. It's a miracle. It's just like, and I said, boy, is that ever a dumb decision? I mean, it's just so short-term, and it ended up you lose control of the pricing, and you lose the control of the benefit of it, and you can't use the pricing to advance, to drive traffic in various ways, to get it from one part to the other, and that's all I'll say about that.
I'll tell you a secret. Doug Ford is running huge deficits, but nobody talks about it.
Nobody talks about it.
Let's not talk about it.
I know.
Present day politics.
Believe me,